I wasn't supposed to be there. The mall had been shut down for almost 15 years and the city had plans to demolish it by the end of the year. But I'd always had a weird fascination with abandoned places, especially ones like this. Ghosts of a time that wasn't really that long ago but felt ancient. Most of the entrances had been boarded up, but there was a gap in the back where the fence didn't quite meet the wall. That's how I got in. Inside, it was dead silent. The air was thick with dust, and the old tile floor was littered with fallen ceiling panels and broken glass. Most of the stores had been stripped bare, their signs barely readable. A few still had mannequins standing inside, their plastic bodies covered in grime. I walked through the food court first. The old neon Panda Express sign still clung to the wall, buzzing faintly, though the restaurant had been gutted years ago. I was about to head deeper when I noticed something near one of the overturned tables. A backpack, bright red, sitting upright, like someone had just set it down. I walked over slowly, my breath shallow. It looked new. The fabric wasn't faded, the zippers weren't rusted. It didn't belong here. I crouched and unzipped the front pocket. Inside, there was a folded piece of paper. I pulled it out and flipped it open, and my stomach twisted. It was a missing persons flyer. A girl, 16 years old, disappeared in 2009. Her face was frozen in an old school photo, smiling, and underneath, in blue ink, someone had written 2 words: "Don't look up." I stared at the note, my fingers gripping the edges of the paper. Don't look up. My first instinct was to do exactly that, but something about the handwriting, the way it was rushed, almost frantic, made me hesitate. Instead, I slowly turned the paper over. The back was blank. No other messages. I set it aside and unzipped the main compartment of the backpack. Inside were a few school books, a pencil case, and a folded-up hoodie. All of it looked weirdly untouched. No dust, no mold, like someone had left it here just yesterday. At the very bottom, I found something else. A flip phone. I pulled it out, my pulse quickening. Bright pink, old, but still in good condition. I flipped it open. The screen lit up. 1 missed call. My breath hitched. No way. The mall had been abandoned for years. There was no power here, no working outlets. And yet, this phone still had battery. I clicked into the call log. There was only one number. No name, no location. Just an incoming call from an unknown number. The timestamp read 2:37 a.m. That was 10 minutes ago. I hesitated, then backed out of the call log and opened the messages folder. There was only one conversation, no name, just a string of old texts, all from the same unknown number. I scrolled to the first one. March 22nd, 2009, 10:17 p.m. Unknown. Are you still in the mall? I frowned. That was the year the girl went missing. I kept scrolling. March 22nd, 2009, 10:24 p.m. Unknown. I'm coming to find you. Stay where you are. March 22, 2009, 10:38 p.m. Unknown. Why did you leave? I told you not to move. The text stopped for a while. The next one was hours later. March 23, 2009, 3:12 a.m. Unknown. I looked everywhere. Where did you go? And then, the last message. Today, 2:37 a.m. Unknown. I see you. I felt my throat tighten. That was the same time as the missed call. 10 minutes ago. A sound echoed through the empty mall. A faint shuffle. Somewhere in the distance. Not close, but not far. I snapped the phone shut and stuffed it back into the backpack. Whatever this was, it wasn't just some old forgotten bag. Someone had left it here. Recently. And if that last message was real, they were still here. I slung the backpack over my shoulder, my pulse quickening. The weight of it felt wrong, like I'd just taken something I wasn't supposed to. The mall was silent. Too silent. I turned, moving quickly but not running, stepping over broken tiles and fallen debris. The exit wasn't far. I just had to get back through the food court, past the boarded-up storefronts, back to the gap in the fence. Then, Another sound. Footsteps. Somewhere behind me. Not running. Not chasing. Just following. I didn't turn around. I kept walking. Faster now. The exit was just ahead, the narrow opening in the fence where I had squeezed through earlier. I practically threw myself forward, pushing past the sharp metal edges, ignoring the way they scraped against my jacket. And then, I was outside. The air was cool and crisp, so different from the thick, stale atmosphere inside. My breathing was unsteady, my hands gripping the backpack straps too tightly. I turned. The mall stood there, empty and hollow. No one came out after me. The silence stretched, and then the phone in the backpack vibrated. Once, a new message. I swallowed hard, then slowly unzipped the bag, pulled out the phone and flipped it open. One unread text. Unknown. You shouldn't have taken that. I didn't sleep that night. I kept the backpack in my room, but I couldn't stop thinking about the text, about the phone still having battery, about that last message. The next morning I searched for more info on the missing girl. Her name was Lisa Carter. Disappeared in 2009. Last seen at the mall. But then I found something else. An old forum post from years ago discussing the case. Someone claiming to be a friend of hers. They mentioned one last thing Lisa had said before she vanished. She had sent a text to a friend right before her phone went dead. It was only 3 words. Don't look up. I wasn't planning on stopping. It was supposed to be a straight drive, 6 hours, no detours. But when I saw that old roadside diner, something made me slow down. It was a relic from the past, the kind of place that looked like it had been frozen in time the moment it shut down. Eddie's 24-hour diner. The neon sign still clung to the roof, half the letters burnt out. The front windows were smeared with dirt, the door slightly ajar. I don't know why I went inside. Curiosity, maybe. The air was stale, thick with dust and something faintly rotten. The booths were cracked and peeling, tables still set as if waiting for customers who never came. Plates with half-eaten food sat abandoned, long since mummified. It was eerie, but I kept walking. That's when I noticed the freezer door in the back. Huge, industrial, locked shut with a thick chain. Something about it made my stomach turn. I hesitated in front of the freezer. The thick chain, rusted but sturdy, wrapped tightly around the handle. Whatever was inside, someone really didn't want it getting out. I stepped back. Maybe I was being dramatic. Maybe it was just old supplies, locked away when the place shut down. Still, something about it made my skin crawl. Instead of messing with the freezer right away, I turned back toward the diner. Maybe I could find a clue about what happened here. I walked behind the counter, my fingers trailing over the faded laminate. A notepad sat near the register, the last order scribbled down in rushed handwriting. Burger, no pickles coffee. Black 1 kid's meal, no drink. The date in the corner caught my eye. October 17th, 2004. Over 20 years ago. A thin layer of dust covered everything except for a single small handprint smeared across the counter. It was fresh. I swallowed hard and turned toward the kitchen. The doors creaked as I pushed through, revealing a cramped space filled with rusting appliances and overturned chairs. Pots and pans lay scattered across the floor, as if someone had left in a hurry. A broken clock on the wall read 3:17. I wasn't sure why, but I made a mental note of it. Then, I saw it. A faded newspaper pinned to the wall near the stove, brittle and yellowed with time. The headline sent a chill through me. Local family vanishes, authorities baffled. There was a photo underneath, grainy, black and white. A man, a woman, and a little girl no older than 6, smiling stiffly in front of a booth. The booth right behind me. I turned slowly, my heart pounding. The dust-covered seat was empty, of course, but the plate in front of it, the food was still fresh. I forced myself to look away from the plate of food and turned back to the kitchen. There had to be more clues here, something to explain what happened. Near the stove, a row of rusted knives hung on a magnetic strip. One was missing, leaving behind only a faint outline where the metal had once rested. I stepped carefully over an overturned mixing bowl and reached for a drawer beneath the counter. It stuck at first, but after a hard tug, it slid open with a sharp screech. Inside, among old receipts and discolored utensils, was a small, leather-bound notebook. The edges were warped, the pages stiff and curled, but the ink was still legible. October 12, 2004. Eddie keeps saying we should just shut the place down. The girl won't stop staring at the freezer, and I swear I heard knocking last night. Told myself it was just the pipes. October 14, 2004. Eddie found the back door open this morning. We changed the locks last week. No sign of a break-in, nothing missing. Except the chain on the freezer was loose. October 16, 2004. She keeps saying the man in the freezer wants to come out, that he talks to her at night. I don't know how she... The rest of the entry was illegible, smeared with something dark. The last page had only 3 words, scrawled in frantic, uneven letters. Do not open. A sharp clatter echoed behind me. I spun around. One of the knives had fallen from the magnetic strip, now resting in the middle of the floor. For the first time, I noticed that the kitchen wasn't as silent as I thought. Somewhere behind me, beneath the hum of dead air, was a sound. A slow, rhythmic tapping. Coming from the freezer. I stood frozen, barely breathing. The tapping wasn't loud, just a soft, deliberate sound spaced out evenly, like someone knocking with the tip of a fingernail. I took a slow step forward, then another. The air felt heavy, thick with the scent of old grease and something metallic. I didn't want to get closer, but my legs carried me forward anyway, like I had to know. A foot away now. The freezer door was massive, its once polished steel now dull with age. The chain wrapped tightly around the handle shifted slightly, almost imperceptibly. I told myself it was my imagination. I leaned in, just enough to press my ear against the cold metal. For a moment, nothing. Then, scratch. A slow, dragging sound, like nails scraping lightly across the inside of the door. I jerked back so fast I nearly lost my footing. The sound stopped. The diner was silent again. I stood there, pulse hammering in my ears, watching the freezer door like it might move on its own. Then a whisper. So quiet. I almost convinced myself I hadn't heard it. Help. Me. I stepped back. Whatever was in that freezer, whatever had just whispered those words, it wasn't my problem. I turned and walked away, forcing myself to keep a steady pace. The floor creaked under my weight, and with every step, I expected to hear something behind me. A bang, a scream, the chain rattling free, but there was nothing. Back through the kitchen, past the counter, past the plate of fresh food that shouldn't exist. My breath felt too loud in my ears. I reached the front door and pushed it open, stepping out into the cool evening air. The sky had darkened. I hadn't realized how long I'd been inside. I reached my car, gripping the handle, but something made me pause. I turned back toward the diner. Through the grimy window, I could just barely see the freezer door. It was open. Not all the way. Just enough for a sliver of darkness to peek through. The chain lay on the floor. The door swung wider. And then... footsteps. Soft. Slow. Coming toward the entrance. I wrenched my car door open and jumped inside, slamming it shut just as the diner's front door creaked open. I didn't wait to see who or what was coming out. I threw the car into reverse and sped off down the road, the diner shrinking in my rearview mirror. I told myself I wouldn't look back, but I did. For just a second, there was someone standing in the doorway, tall, unmoving, watching me go. And just before the diner disappeared from view, I swear, I saw them smile. We almost didn't go inside. The hospital had been abandoned for nearly 30 years, and from the outside, it looked ready to collapse. Windows shattered, walls covered in ivy, the front doors barely hanging onto their hinges. But for urban explorers like me and Kyle, that was part of the thrill. Place is a death trap, Kyle muttered, shining his flashlight over the crumbling brick. I grinned. That's what makes it fun. The inside was worse. The air was damp, carrying the faint scent of mold and something stale. Old gurneys lined the hallways, their wheels rusted in place. Faded patient charts littered the floor, some still clipped to rotting clipboard boards. This place is huge, Kyle said, sweeping his flashlight over a sign hanging above us. Radiology, intensive care, psychiatric ward. Most of the doors were locked, but we still found plenty of ways inside. We wandered through darkened hallways, past old operating rooms with rusting equipment left behind, patient beds still covered in brittle sheets. We were halfway through the second floor when Kyle stopped. Hey, this place have a basement? I frowned. Of course it does. Morgue's always underground. No, I mean, does it have more than one? He pointed his flashlight at a door at the end of the hall. It was different from the others, newer, the paint less faded. A small sign was bolted to the front, Sub-Level 2, Research Facility. I felt a strange sense of unease. I thought this place only had one basement, I said. Kyle tested the handle, unlocked. We exchanged a glance, then we stepped inside. The air changed as soon as we stepped through the door. It was colder here, the kind of damp chill that settles in your bones. The stairwell stretched downward, vanishing into darkness. No dust on the steps, no cobwebs, like someone had been using it. Kyle went first, his flashlight beam bouncing off the concrete walls. I followed close behind, feeling the air grow even colder with each step. Sub-Level 1. A metal door stood slightly ajar, leading into what looked like a standard hospital basement. I caught a glimpse of storage shelves, old hospital beds stacked against the walls, a rusting gurney with a torn leather strap hanging loose. Kyle ignored it and kept going. I hesitated. Should we at least check? Come on, he interrupted. I want to see what's on the next level. I sighed and followed. Sub-Level 2. At the bottom of the stairs, another door. This one was different. Thick steel, like something you'd see in a bank vault. No windows, no handle, just a single keypad embedded in the wall next to it. Kyle tested the keypad. The buttons lit up. Still has power? I muttered. That wasn't right. Kyle grinned and pressed a few numbers at random. Nothing happened. Then, as if in response, a loud metallic clunk echoed from the other side. We both stepped back. Then, the door began to open. Not fast, not automatic. Something was pulling it from the inside. Kyle and I moved at the same time. We killed our flashlights and pressed ourselves against the cold concrete wall. The only light now came from the faint glow of the keypad. The door groaned as it swung open. A rush of stale, freezing air poured out, carrying the scent of something old and metallic. I strained my ears, listening for movement. At first, nothing. Then, a slow shuffling step. Then another. Whoever, or whatever, had opened the door was coming out. The darkness swallowed everything beyond the doorway. I couldn't make out a shape, only the faintest suggestion of movement. Then a sound. A whisper. Not words. Not even a voice. Just the sound of breathing. Deep. Wet. Wrong. Kyle's hand gripped my arm, his fingers digging in tight. I could feel the unspoken question between us. Do we run? Then something changed. The breathing stopped, like it had just realized we were there. Then, a sudden, sharp inhale. Right before the lights in the stairwell flickered back on. Kyle moved first. He yanked me back and bolted up the stairs, his footsteps pounding against the concrete. I didn't think, I just ran. Behind us, the heavy steel door slammed open. I didn't look back. I couldn't, but I heard it. The sound of something large and fast crashing toward us. Not shuffling anymore. Running. Kyle hit the landing first, shoving through the sub-level 1 door. I was right behind him. We sprinted past rusting hospital beds and scattered equipment, dodging toppled cabinets and flickering overhead lights. Behind us, that wet, ragged breathing. Close. Kyle reached the stairs first and took them two at a time. My chest burned, my legs ached, but I didn't stop. It was getting closer. Halfway up the stairs, the lights went out. Total blackness. I nearly lost my footing. My shoulder slammed into the wall, but I kept going, chasing the sound of Kyle's footsteps. Then, a noise that made my stomach drop. A deep, metallic slam. Kyle had reached the first floor. He'd shut the door. He'd locked me in. I skidded to a stop, spinning toward the stairwell below. I couldn't see anything, couldn't hear anything, except a single wet breath. Right behind me. I slammed my fists against the door. "Kyle, open the door!" Silence. I pounded harder. The cold metal rattled in its frame. "Kyle, please, you locked me in." Still nothing. Then, a single shuddering breath behind me. Close. Too close. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my forehead against the door. My own breath came fast and uneven. My hands shook against the cold steel. Then, a whisper, not Kyle. "You don't have to run." My whole body seized. The voice was wrong, familiar, but not. Like it had borrowed the shape of something human and hadn't quite gotten it right. I turned my head just enough to glimpse over my shoulder. A shape, tall, unnaturally thin. Bare feet planted on the concrete. Its arms hung too long at its sides, the fingers curled in toward its palms. The skin, pale but slick, almost translucent. It didn't move, just stood there, watching. Then, it smiled, not with its mouth, with its entire face. I felt bile rise in my throat. I pounded against the door one last time. "Kyle, you bastard, open the door!" And then, a click. The door swung open. I lunged forward, tumbling into the hallway. Kyle was standing there, pale, eyes wide. I didn't stop to yell at him. I just grabbed his arm and ran. Behind us, the door slammed shut. This time, whatever was inside didn't try to follow. But as we drove away, I glanced at the hospital one last time. Something was standing at the window. Subscribe for more eerie stories, because the next one might be even worse. And if you've ever found something you shouldn't have, let me know in the comments.